Wednesday lunch here at the Divinity School. I'm Karen White. I'm the Director of Communications. I organized this series, so it's my pleasure to welcome you to our program today. As we get started and settle down, I just want to do a little housekeeping and a few announcements. So first of all, thank you so much to our chef Rachel and to our crew for making this delicious meal for you. Thank you very much. So we would appreciate it if you would take just a couple minutes on your way out to clean up your own stuff. So throw away your leftovers in your plate. Put your silverware into our yellow soapy vat that's going to be sitting out there on the floor. And if you could take your mug, your dirty mug or glass, or whatever you drank out of, and put it on the table in the back, that just helps the crew get cleaned up a little quicker. You can also turn off your cell phone noisemakers. Appreciate that. Are there any community announcements? Okay. No? Nobody? Okay. Well, we still have lots of events coming up in the quarter. If you're not getting our email list with all of our public events, let me know. I can add you, no problem. This is not our last lunch by any means. We have several more lunches coming up. Next week's lunch, we're going to have some speakers from the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless speaking to us. So please do sign up for that. The week after that, we have Professor John Ray speaking. Human geneticists. It's going to be really cool. And the week after that is going to be our annual, maybe not a barbecue, but it's going to be beautiful out that day. It will. We will have delicious outdoor type food. So, Angela, do you want to say something? Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. If we don't have any community announcements, then I'm going to get started with introducing our speakers today. I'm really thrilled. I'm always so happy when I can introduce our own professors. So we have two speakers today. Professor William Schweiker, who's the Edward L. Ryerson Distinguished Service Professor of Theological Ethics, is speaking, and Kristine Culp. She's Associate Professor of Theology, and she's Dean of the Disciples Divinity House. They're going to be speaking on Innovating Humanities. For the past 2 years, as scholars in the Enhancing Life project, Professors Schweiker and Culp and 33 other scholars from around the world have been researching and teaching on the notion of enhancing life in their disciplines, in the academy, and in the larger world. And we're going to be hearing about this as humanities innovation, how the resources of humanities illuminate possible futures. So I'm just going to leave it at that, and please join me in welcoming Professor Schweiker and Culp.
Well, I want to begin by thanking the Divinity School and Taryn Wine, particularly the Innovation Fest here at the University of Chicago, which is going on around the campus, and also the Templeton Foundation that has funded this project over the last 3 years. You will also find on your table a flyer, they'll eventually blow this up as a poster, about our final conference this summer, to which all of you are cordially invited. Please come if you can. Our concern today is to show how the Enhancing Life project is innovative in terms of the humanities. We don't oftentimes think of the humanities as illuminating or advancing or innovating knowledge. We tend to, as humanists, look backwards. You'll hear more about that in a moment. In fact, if I think about it in terms of my own experience, there's been 4 main ways that scholars have thought about innovation in the humanities. The first, and in some sense most simple, is ongoing projects here and around the world to digitalize ancient texts and artifacts so that they can be studied further. That's simply the application of current technology to humanistic resources. Secondly, a social scientist, social psychologist here at the University of Chicago and the first director of the Arete project, a man named John Cacioppo, once said that what the humanities do is shed a spotlight on a problem, and then the sciences answer it. And I said, well, John, doesn't the humanities help with answering the problem as well? We had a long discussion. I've also been involved at the Wisdom Project headed by Harold Nussbaum, a project called the Essential Self Project. This is trying to think about the impact of technologies like Fitbit on our own self-understanding. But in that situation, what has happened is scholars in various disciplines come and say what they think they contribute to the project, but there's no reflection back the other way. How does thinking about issues such as digitalizing life impact what I do as an ethicist and theologian? So there you're seeing the humanities more as resources, but are not necessarily impacted by the problem. That's different than the spotlight model and different than the digitalizing texts models. The Enhancing Life project is trying to do something very different. Innovative both in its structure, we'll hear more about that in a few moments, and in its content. We've taken a common topic. What in the world does it mean to enhance life? Do a little test. How many people in this room want their life to be better? Can anyone tell us what you mean by that?
Health insurance?
The problem is we have a culture driven by the desire to enhance life, and we're not quite sure what that would mean, how one would measure it, how there could be criteria for this. So we've gathered these scholars to take a common problem from within their discipline, look at it from within their discipline, and also ask how, through collaborative work, that may transform their discipline itself. Further, we're seeing the past as treasure troves of experiments in human living. So when we look at religious traditions, we're seeing them as ongoing stretches of an experiment on what does it mean to live life in specific ways, and how, if at all, might that shed light on our current problem. Today we're going to proceed in the following way. We're going to show you some films that have been made of our first two summer research seminars. Between them we'll have some comments by myself and Professor Culp. And then after the second film we will end with Q&A, hopefully a fair amount of time, in which either Culp or myself can speak about our general project, our own projects, or questions you have about the whole. So let's start then with this film from the first summer seminar. It gives you a good sense of what the project is trying to do and how it's trying to do it. Can everybody hear? We are a unique generation of people who are living on a planet where all levels of life are endangered. And therefore it becomes the responsibility of all of us, in our own distinctive ways, to try to meet that challenge and also to enhance life. Over many years, Gunther and I have had conversations about theological and ethical issues, and one of the things we noticed is that too often people in theology and ethics and the humanities look backward.
We're sitting together and, it's like a kind of blessed moment that we really thought, let's do something. And let's do something rather larger, not just one conference, but let's do something where we have a multi-year project.
And that was the beginning of working from the notion of enhancing life.
Of life is is about daring to hope, being open to the future.
To making sense and making more sense of life.
Enhancing life is about improving the individual's life as a part of improving life for people more generally.
Normally, people from the humanities and people from natural science, for instance, don't talk about this issue at all. And our hope is actually that we will create settings of scholarship where this question will become an important question.
And they all speak their own language. They all kind of have their own frame of reference. But they're all coming together for one common purpose, which is to enhance life.
We have people here studying end-of-life care. We all have touched that in some ways. We have people studying cell phone use. We have people studying things that are just part of everyday life, but examining them through this lens of enhancing life.
We wanted to get people in different levels, different dimensions of our society, so that we could have impact in those different levels.
We did this with a seemingly paradox strategy. We gave them a lot of freedom for free flow conversation, working on their own stuff in their room or in the library, being just on a hike, and at the same time have a pretty clear, structured program.
To me, the enhancement of life means not living my life just in my head.
Finding the strength within your own quivering innermost self.
Embedding a single life problem in truly abundant life.
So the fact that we're all together doing this not only enhances the project, it enhances our own interactions with each other, is that we would create a new set of studies called Enhancing Life Studies. And that can only come out of the group. It can't come out of us individually. It has to come out together.
Interacting with senior scholars from different disciplines made me think and sharpen my ideas around what I'd like to do with the Enhanced Life Project in my own field of medicine and Islamic law.
For one thing, this is an interdisciplinary group of international scholars who together will have a great impact on their fields. We'll not only be producing research on this subject, but we're also going to be teaching courses at our home institutions. So we'll be able to really reach hundreds, maybe thousands of students, all of whom will have a sense then of what it means to enhance life.
If we do this right, and if we show that enhancing life is an important topic, and if we show that you must have religion, the humanities, the social sciences, the natural and biological sciences all involved, then we have actually given a way to rethink the modern university.
It was an amazing event. People were willing to listen, and what is very important, they were willing to balance their own project and the overarching concern for enhancing life.
These people are well on their way, a lot of them. Their projects already have almost immediate potential to bring forth a conversation about enhancing life.
There are plenty of research projects that do have kind of a normative agenda, how to make the world better, but in general, those tend to be policy-oriented. So how to make governments better, how to make social policies better. And I think that the Enhancing Life Project is aiming at something bigger than that.
Enhancing life is a kind of boundary management. There are limits we should accept, and there are limits that become thresholds we have to transcend.
So for me, part of what enhancing life means must begin with human beings. For us to wrestle with and grasp the full complexity of our lives so that they can be deepened, broadened, and in that way enhanced. Then the other part is that we hope, or I hope, is that we address this question of the endangerment of all levels of life on our planet. I think that's the responsibility of the 21st century.
What is enhancing life?
Attending to and helping to ensure the possibilities of the full aliveness of creaturely and cosmic life.
Enhancing life means understanding the necessity and even value of vulnerability in human experience.
Enhancing life for me is opportunity.
Enhancing life is
What is enhancing life? The answer to that question is that I don't know yet, but you can check back with me in a year or two and I'll tell you.
So this first video that you saw was obviously from our summer seminar in Banff, Canada. What a treat that was to be with the other scholars in that context. And it also gave us the opportunity to think about enhancing life in relation to nature and natural goods. The next summer, last summer, we met in Liebenberg Castle in Berlin. You're going to get a little sample of that shortly. And there the context lent itself to looking at political life. We spent a day going into the Reichstag in Berlin and talking with one of the legislators there. And this summer we will meet in Wisconsin, not so exciting for a person from Chicago, but it's an international group of scholars. And then we will end by coming into Chicago, not only for the final capstone, but also to look at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and the economic dimensions of enhancing life. My task is to talk a little bit about those summer seminars and the structure of the project as a whole, as a structure for innovation. What does it mean to innovate in the humanities? As Bill Schweiker's typology suggests, it can't mean simply to record and generate more knowledge. It has to involve addressing certain problems in real life, as Ellen Hubershar, who's one of our interlocutors, will say in the next video, and bringing the resources of the humanities to bear in working on these problems so that human and earthly life is enhanced. In designing the project, that meant that we couldn't simply coalesce around solving a moral problem, but that we had to both describe the nature of the issue before us, as well as describe the resources that were possible, and also to get our hands dirty in the problem itself. And the structure of that was that these 35 scholars, entered into a sort of small universe. It was most intense in those summer seminars. And we coalesced around a sort of mantra that went like this: work, converse, enjoy. And that mantra, that pattern of being together, translated into a schedule that gave us ample time for our own individual work, to find connections with other scholars, to, as you saw, looked like a very active 2 weeks from the video. We were climbing and walking and talking, and that is in fact what we were doing. And then we would meet every afternoon at around 3 for a seminar that was focused either around presenting our own work or around developing some common themes and having those themes emerge. And it was that whole pattern, work, converse, enjoy, that led to all kinds of surprising connections. My own project is fairly abstract in comparison to some of the other projects. I'm looking at glory or the aliveness of life. And one of the surprising connections that I made was with Amit Pinchesky, who's working on the other probably most abstract project in the Enhancing Life project. He's working on echo as a way of thinking about communications, but from a completely different sphere. That's only just to give you one example, and those convergences happened both informally and formally. I think the first video does a good job of capturing some of the energy of that sort of expanding small universe that redounded in new connections, approaches, knowledge, both shared and in individual projects. So that layering of the shared and the individual. And the coalescences were not merely around sort of practical problems and their resolution, but again, at all of those sorts of levels of new framework, new knowledge, new categories, new approaches. The summer seminars were also moments to bring back some of the work during the year, which included, it went by maybe pretty quickly in the video, we are each writing a book, we're each teaching 2 courses, we've done blog posts, so there are a number of other activities that stretch out the knowledge that's generated during the summer seminars and that allows it to be brought back together and to generate new knowledge. That kind of structure differs from a lot of what will happen in academic conferences, which bring people together around a certain theme, but don't give them that long life and those rich relations that really do make you accountable to each other, that make it possible for your work to go new directions. And it also contrasts to, say, context of advanced research institutes, which give you the time, but they don't bring you together around shared problems and identifying shared resources. So that's just a little window into how the structure itself was both innovative and promoting of innovation, and how humanities can be, well, let me leave you with this one image. I have a good friend who's an architect who studied many of the buildings on campus, and he studied the physics building before it was taken down, and he said there were water coolers in important places in that building, and it allowed scholars to just in the course of their day-to-day interactions collide with each other at the water coolers and to pick up bits of conversations. In some sense, that architectural structure for innovation is much more intentionally elaborated in the structure for innovation in this project. Those happy collisions that expanded our universes.
Picking up on that point, this notion of uniting 2 traditional forms of intellectual production, the Institutes for Advanced Study, a lot of time, no common topic, conferences, common topic, no time. We brought together these 35 scholars for 2 weeks from around the world. That's an expensive project, and you have to do this in contexts that are conducive to people being happy, which is one of the reasons we met in Banff and Berlin and now in Wisconsin. So part of this is a very serious issue we don't think enough about. How do you create intellectual communities where there's actually enough trust among scholars to really engage and challenge each other? We don't want a situation where each person is in their little box. And I do biotechnology, for instance, and it's kind of interesting to hear. No, we want to have the disciplines transform through the interaction, and that requires an immense amount of trust. it also implies a particular theory of knowledge. And it is this: no one discipline has it all. No one discipline has it all. And furthermore, objects of knowledge are generated at the intersection of different disciplines. So it's not as if we, and I know this will bemoan some of our philosopher friends, it's not as if you ask the philosopher to come in and tell you what enhancing life means and that's it. It's not as if you have the physical scientists do the same thing. So there's a deep epistemology and theory about the creation of knowledge, which we believe is actually the future of the university. That we have to think in multi-perspectival and multi-dimensional ways of things, because objects of knowledge are not controlled by one perspective. And this project has been an exercise in trying to create such a community. We're going to now see the second film. The one thing I want to note is it's important for you to understand, because there'll be interviews with folks on the street in Berlin. For a German, science means Wissenschaft. It means all domains of knowledge. So this also might come as a shock to some of our people in this room. For a German, theology is a science. It's a domain of knowledge, and this is important to understand in some of the beginnings of the clip here. So let's do the clip, and then we'll have a couple other comments afterwards in Q&A. I would like you to think about, as you're watching the film, what the motto of this university is. Everyone here?
People want to change something, so they need a kind of self-awareness and also group or society awareness, and the awareness that you can change something.
Keep going.
It should open more to the people and should also take more importance in daily life and work and so on.
Science in general should give the information more to the people instead of keeping them. I think that's the main problem, that they don't spread the knowledge.
Sorry about that, folks. We're from the Humanities.
People want to change something, so they need a kind of self-awareness and also group or society awareness, and the awareness that you can change something.
Philosophy should open more to the people and should also take more importance in daily life and work and so on.
Science in general should give the information more to the people instead of keeping them. I think that's the main problem, that they don't spread the knowledge.
It is possible to transform the results of scientific research into politic action, then there's a big possibility to change a lot.
Is deeply political. I might just be talking about concepts as a philosopher, but you wouldn't want to think about new concepts if they didn't connect with real life political situations.
The word word political comes from the Greek word polis, which means city. And yes, we're thinking about how to live together in the polis.
Just given the fact that we live together in communities means we have to organize our lives, and if we're going to enhance our lives, we have to enhance our political lives as well.
In this world of divisions, we're very polarized around our political parties, and we're forgetting that there's much more that connects us than divides us.
I think part of the work that we need to do as a project is finding a language to talk with the political arena and the medical arena and the scientific arena and the theological arena and so on and so on.
Outside of the academy want to know what scholars are doing in order to confront these major issues.
So we're constantly having to think about how we can apply it to the general public, and if we don't, we're doing a disservice.
Academics, theoreticians should also try to dirty their hands, maybe, and see if they can make a difference.
I hope that many of the scholars will find the courage already have to do the translation into the appropriate life spheres outside of the academy. Then we will see some interesting things happening, and then life really starts, because it's no use to just publish books. That's only life in the library or on the internet. We need life outside, and the potential of this project is absolutely fantastic.
Problems in real life, and then you take a look at who is working on these problems. Human sciences have a perspective, natural scientists have a perspective, theologians have a perspective, and then it gets intriguing and interesting.
And I saw a number of folks connected about a theory that maybe someone has been working on that the other scholar didn't know. Folks were asking for references all the time, texting and emailing.
And we saw it here in Berlin at the castle, that there was really something going on. Someone said last year, keep the fire alive. Luckily, we did not have to keep it actively. It was really burning.
Uplifted because I met several people last year, and I know who will be very good for my own work with whom I can engage, and I learned from those who are further away from my own research. They really open up new worlds for me.
This middle seminar, we knew going in it would be this moment of anxiety and creativity at the same time, and that was the case. There was a lot of energy and goodwill, but also a lot of, well, are we sure we know what we're doing and where we're going, both as a group and individually?
There's a timeline, there's a deadline. We're halfway through, and we all have specific outcomes that we're trying to meet, and so, this is sort of the check-in and the checkpoint about, all right, what have you done, and what do you still have yet to do, and so. So as a physician, I so rarely get to sit next to theologians and biblical scholars and social scientists, and it was such a privilege to listen to them and a struggle to understand them and to take that into my own work, because I wanted to really derive from the wealth of the knowledge and experience from that group to bring a unique aspect to my work.
So the conference reminded me how much knowledge is out there that applies to the recent debates, and we should really go and
as journalists, approach the academia and encourage them to bring in their knowledge.
There's some unpredictability, but there's real evidence that we are on a good way, that we are moving into the right direction. So we'll see what Enhancing Life studies will look in a couple of years, and we'll see next year what actually came out of this productive tension of searching for enhancing life as a frame and working with it, and the scholarly work in the various fields.
What does it mean to build a great nation? Should the government decide on how much privacy is good for us?
What makes a life worth living?
One of the things the Enhancing Life project does is give us the chance to develop new kinds of language.
Human beings have always sought not only to survive, but to better or enhance their lives.
We live in a time when human consumption patterns are putting unprecedented pressures on the natural world.
In today's culture of hyper-communication, it is important to appreciate and cherish communication breakdown.
We need to know how new futures are made, including those of the past.
My Enhancing Life project.
So what should we do next?
Okay. Just a couple comments, and then we'll throw it open to Q&A. It's important to see that the context within which these seminars took place, Banff, Canada, Berlin, and then Chicago, are different contexts where life is both enhanced but endangered deeply. When we were in Banff, Canada, we could go up and see the melting of the glaciers due to global warming. In Berlin, we were meeting in the former East Berlin, and therefore thinking about political context within which a city is emblematic for the breakdown of political life and tyranny. When we come to Chicago, we'll go to the Chicago Board of Trade, one of the global centers of economic power in this world, but within a city that has some of the most abject poverty that we can imagine. So the context of setting this was also meant to help enable the conversation between scholars. You may have also noticed, thanks to Sarah Bigger's smashing the gong, that we have different styles of interaction. The two seminars have been very different in terms of the forms we have used to engage each other's thought. It's not all, some of it's sitting around a square table, but we also have different patterns because people converse and enjoy and think in different ways. Finally, I ask you all to think about the motto of this university. Does anyone know the motto of this university? Please, someone know the motto. Hannah.
It is Crescat Scientia Vita Excolator.
Yeah, and how would you take the last two, how would you understand the last half of that? Vita Excolator.
Let knowledge grow more and more.
So that
human life be enriched.
Enriched or enhanced. So we've also seen this project from its very beginning, and this is important in terms of how we want to validate our intellectual claims. If knowledge grows, but life is not enhanced, enriched in some way, what kind of knowledge is that? Right? So this project is also deeply embedded within the purposes of this university. With that, let me just throw it open to Q&A. Chris, you want to come up? Yes, sir.
What I was wondering was, in what ways has this project included and engaged the general public, if any, and also, what do you think the impact of that engagement, or lack thereof, will have on the project for the long term?
Yeah, it's already done that in one way. It'll do it another way at the final conference, and then you're asking the $100,000 question. So let me go with those. At each, as Dean Culp noted, at each one of our seminars, we have what are called public interlocutors. These are people who come for a week at the end, who are from different fields, They're not academics who come and engage the scholars and push them to be coherent and intelligible to them. They will also be participants in our final conference as a way of trying to get the practical implication of this. The final conference is open to everyone. We're canvassing the Midwest to try to get people to come. We have it down in the Gleacher Center for a purpose. It's down in the middle of the economic world in the city rather than here in the university campus. But you're asking a deeper question, I think, which is, how does the academy impact the larger public? I think that is, to be honest, usually indirect. That is to say, we in this room and in the university are not elected officials to develop specific policies. What we want to do is educate the folks who are doing that, right? And sometimes in order to do that education, we have to step back from the immediacy of the public problems, aware of those problems, wanting to get at them, hence the Enhancing Life Project. But none of us are elected officials or policymakers in any narrow sense. So I think the academy sort of impacts things indirectly. Now the U of C is great on this because we do have certain parts of the university that are more directly involved. But we're trying to create an intellectual community where scholars in 35 different, these different fields will understand their own role to try to have that kind of impact.
I think, and I also add, it isn't only a matter of the public being there at the outset to formulate the problem and at the end to get to receive the outcome, but in a number of ways. I mean, just even having the variety of persons that you're talking with already forces you to a certain kind of publicness in your thinking. And the blog posts are one way throughout it that we also are asked to think and communicate in ways that are accessible to the broadest possible set of persons.
This over here and then here.
Yeah, this was great. The model of interdisciplinary conversation is really inspiring. I did notice watching both of these videos that at no point does anybody use the word justice. And I'm sure that's not because nobody thought it or because it didn't seem interesting, but it's, I was wondering if you could talk about why it didn't wind up being part of the semantic field of the marketing, if it was maybe, if it wound up seeming conceptually in tension with the focus on the enhancement of the individual, or if it put strain on some of the other arguments you wanted to advance, or if it just didn't fit.
Well, the most obvious answer is there's no agreements on what justice is. So it's not as if we could come with one concept and advance that. I can assure you.
Definition for enhancing life either, right?
Yes, but the project is on enhancing life, which is why we're gathering people. Now, folks within, we have a woman who's working in child care, is very interested in the questions of the justice of the adoption system in the United States, for instance. We have other people, a man working on female genital mutilation among the Kurds, who's very interested in sexual justice. So if you want to put this in a very technical sense, we're trying to think about a human good that justice would have to serve. And if you don't know what the good is, then how do you know whether justice is serving it or not? The second and glib answer is that the Templeton Foundation, and it's odd that I'm running this thing, the Templeton Foundation has an allergic reaction to the term ethics. So we could not use even that term in all of our application and so on. But it found its way back just as justice did. Yes, sir.
So a lot of the emphasis in both of the videos and your talk has been on the diversity of fields represented, and the name, the lunch is Innovating Humanities. But the conference breakdown is more than half of the speakers and both the keynote speakers have appointments in either religion, theology, or Bible studies. So if 19 out of 35 scholars are in theology, doesn't the project seem in some ways more about, theology in conversation with a large number of fields than sort of an equal questioning of this across, sort of whole array of academic or even human disciplines?
Well, ironically, the answer to that is no. we had, in order for the funding specifications through Templeton, we had to have a majority of scholars in religion. But we have 6 different religions being studied from different methodologies: sociologists of religion, historians of religion, people who are working in religious ethics, such as myself, others in theology, others in medicine, ethics, and religion. So we've not had any complaints from the other scholars on this. The other thing to note, and this is my own personal judgment, religion is the most complex human phenomenon on this planet. It has more impact on more people every day than any other social phenomena on our planet. Certainly more than the market system, or media, or politics. And therefore, to study religion, as I said before, is to study these millennia-long experiments in human living. And many of the scholars who were talking about the importance of religion were not religion scholars. Okay? So it's not meant to somehow have a hidden religion agenda behind it. Quite the contrary. It is rather to say, and this is important for the humanities, how do we understand the human past as a treasure trove to help us live into the future? But the simple answer is the funding agency required. But I gave a good rationale, right? Thank you. Great question. All these are great questions. Yes, John.
We heard in the video the term general public used several times, common good, I think popped up once or twice, and you just used the term the human good. So I'm wondering if there's an underlying assumption in the Enhancing Life project across the scholars of a unified human good, and what you do about the question of competition between general publics and whether or not different goods can be competing and goods for different segments of society might be competing.
Very good question. It relates to Amanda's point as well.
Yeah, but our the Advanced Career Scholars part of the seminar this last summer was, we spent a whole week on identifying dimensions of goods, competing goods, mapping those out, talking about them, trying to think about ways in which these different projects integrate those many goods or exacerbate them. The other thing that comes to mind is a different strand to your answer is I do think there's a tendency in the project to to define life as human life. And that's, I think, just simply one of the limits of that we can't do everything in this. But I think that's been one of the learnings is that there's certain things that don't get addressed as fully as might ideally be addressed as well. But goods, yes. To the extent that there was some pushback on how much we focused on goods, and then I found myself this last year doing a number of other projects. It's like, where did those go? To the questions of dimensions of good, levels of good, integration. I think those are, and I suspect that's the experience of every other scholar in the project, that those are exactly the kinds of things that we need to keep sorting through. So I think you're going to see a lot of that in the projects that come out of this as well.
This is one of the it's a really good question. Both that and all of them have been great. But let's think about this for a moment. Okay, so we're all humanities folks in here, but imagine you're talking to a genetic scientist. How much diversity in the human gene pool is that scientist going to say exists? Not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. So to think with scientists on this is to rethink our understanding of the depths of culture and how culture interacts with the natural givenness of human existence. Does that mean we think there is a human essence? I think there would be 35 different answers to that in the group. But the group is trying to think about how do you enhance life given that living things have certain biological and genetic conditions. that one must consider. Those conditions also give rise to conflict, right? But maybe a little bit different than cultural conflict. So we're trying to get both sides of the stick and get in my own project for instance, is trying to develop what is called a compatibilist theory of freedom, which is how can freedom be compatible with the natural givens and promises and causal structures within which we exist. And part of that, interest of that for me came out of dealing with these scientists. Certain things start to seem implausible in my field once you take very seriously the engagement with other disciplines. Okay, yes, right here.
How much has, from your conversations, enhancing life been synonymous with increasing happiness?
This is do you want to take that or you want me to?
Go ahead. I would just say in general, there's many things that you could think that enhancing meant, that it means more, that it means happier, that it means bigger, better, whatever. And that's been one of the things that we've really had to complicate and deal with. And where the interaction of the different disciplines has been so valuable, because you've got all of these test cases and vocabulary and concepts that help you think through that.
Yeah, it's a similar problem with the question of happiness. If we were to ask what everyone thought about happiness, and we'd have a whole bunch of different answers. And ironically, some forms of human happiness do not enhance life. And interestingly enough, some religious traditions quite clear that the point of life is not happiness. But it might be increasing, deepening, is what Kristine Culp calls the aliveness of life. Right? So we didn't want to go in with set concepts, but rather, as one of our theologians put it, create new languages. And that's what the enhancing life is supposed to do. But there's a long tradition going back to Greek philosophy that would understand enhancing in terms of eudaimonia, or happiness and well-being. Yes, over here and then up in front.
I noticed that when the disciplines that were included and the scholars were listed, that the arts weren't included, and I was wondering if there was a reasoning behind that. When I think of enhancing life, the arts comes to mind almost immediately. And as a dramaturg who spoke at one of these lunches earlier this year mentioned, there's an experience of the theater that you don't get from watching a Netflix series. And so how are the arts included? Why not?
Two things. Ronnie Hartfeld is one of our public interlocutors, was the former director of Museum of Art here in Chicago. And she brings a deep concern and presence for that. The second thing is, we just didn't get applicants. We did a worldwide search for people, sending out stuff so you could apply, and sadly we didn't get as many as we wanted.
But there were also certain disciplines. It wasn't wide open to every discipline.
No, we included the arts on the social. Yeah. So that's just the luck of the draw. We received, I suppose, over 200 or some odd applicants, which we had to window down, and we just didn't receive them, sadly. But yes, of course, that would be a way to enhance life. Here, you've been waiting patiently, and then there, and then I think we have to end up with those.
Thinking about when the one gentleman was talking about doing more than publishing books, I was trying to understand what were some of the more palpable bottom line goals, and I'm wondering if those are measurable for you all, like, say 5 years from now, how do you know, like, okay, we have checked these boxes, like, we are enhancing life in these ways?
Templeton Foundation is very interested in how you quantify the effect of the dollars of theirs that you spend. So
we've been spending $4.5 million.
Yeah, so they would like to see exactly what this means. So we are tracking how many students are in the course, how many people start a dissertation on enhancing life, sort of the educational impact. And then one of the big things will be the conference, and who comes to the conference, and then what can we build after the conference. But it is very difficult to quantify the impact of an academic think tank, essentially, on the world outside of the academy. We are trying to do that, and if you have any ideas, let me know.
We count the number of hits on our website and the films. There's a lot more films on the website. On blog posts we count the hits on those. So there's a lot of ways we're trying to quantify those things. And each of the universities where the scholars are at are wanting them to tell them what in the world they're doing. One last one, I think, yes.
Some of the questions, especially Denmark's, kind of touch upon this issue of norms and values, the good and the right, universal in particular. And one of the comments you made about how science and how it reshaped some of the things you were doing, I was wondering if in these conversations, and maybe by the end of the project progress, you see some conclusions and these, all debate in terms of how much mostly natural social sciences maybe are reshaping the way in which more philosophical, theological approaches to enhancing life might be changing, especially talking about this common shared ground that we get through the sciences that may reshape the conversation, especially in theology and philosophy, but other humanities fields.
My own take on that is that yes, but it's more dialectical. Yes, these natural and celestial sciences are putting pressure on religious studies, theology, ethics, and so on. I would say in the direction of ethical naturalism. By that I mean, if you want to know what enhances life, you've got to know something about the creature whose life you're trying to enhance. And therefore, you need the knowledge of the social sciences and the natural sciences so that we know what kind of creatures what it would mean to enhance. But the social sciences and the natural sciences, from my perspective, can't tell you why enhancing life matters. I'll tell you the mechanisms to measure and include it, and might say you really ought to take these seriously. But when you're into the question of, that's why the model of the university is underlined. When you down to the deepest level of, well, why does science matter to us? Why does enhancing life matter to us? Then you're into the whole domain of religious studies, philosophy, ethics, and theology. And I think it's part of our task, I was trying to say this in the first film, to see this question of the endangerment enhancing life as the question of the 21st century. I mean that myself very, very seriously. And we need to see how our different disciplines might contribute to that. Does that help? Yeah? Okay. Thank you all for coming. Come to our final conference.